You really locked me out? Of my own land?
The morning sun spilled gold across the wide Texas pasture. But for Marcus Taylor, it didn't feel like freedom. He stood on his porch, coffee mug in hand, staring at something that made his stomach knot. A brand new chain-link fence, gleaming, under the light, stretched across his property line. It wasn't his. It wasn't even on his land. Yet there it stood, cutting him off from his own road, his own water, his own way of life. At the center of that fence was a heavy steel gate, bolted shut, padlocked, and the only key wasn't in his pocket. It belonged to the Lakeside Meadows Homeowners Association, run by a woman who had made it clear from the day Marcus moved in that she didn't want him here. Neighbors whispered about how strict the HOA was. They said the president, Marjorie Kane, had a reputation for bending rules to her will and making life miserable for anyone who didn't fall in line. But Marcus hadn't expected it to go this far. He hadn't expected to wake up one morning and find his dream boxed in like a criminal behind bars. For him, this land was more than just dirt. It was a piece of hard-earned freedom. He had spent years saving, working odd jobs, and hauling freight across Texas highways to buy this ranch. At 47 years old, he had finally carved out a place where he could breathe, where his cattle could graze, and where he could feel the open air without a boss or a clock controlling his every move. But now, that freedom had a lock on it, and it wasn't his lock. Marcus walked toward the gate, boots crunching in the gravel, trying to keep his temper steady. Two men in HOA polo shirts were finishing the job, tightening bolts like soldiers carrying out orders. "Morning," Marcus called, his voice calm but firm. "Mind telling me what this is?" Neither man met his eyes. One muttered, "Talk to the board." Then came the sound of tires on gravel. A spotless silver SUV rolled up. Out stepped Marjorie Kane, clipboard under her arm, sunglasses hiding eyes that never softened. She didn't greet him. She didn't explain. She simply said, "You've been notified of your non-compliance issues, Mr. Taylor. Until you correct them, this measure will stand." Marcus's chest tightened. His cattle bawled from inside the pasture, penned in like zoo animals. His road was gone. His water was cut off. And in that moment, Marcus realized something deep. This wasn't just about a fence. It was about control. And he wasn't about to give in. Marcus Taylor hadn't come to Lakeside Meadows looking for a fight. He had come chasing peace. Born and raised in Houston's Fifth Ward, Marcus knew the weight of hard work and the sting of being underestimated. For 2 decades, he had hauled freight across dusty highways, sleeping in the cab of his truck more nights than he cared to remember. Each mile logged was another dollar saved, another step closer to his dream. What he wanted wasn't flashy. He didn't crave big city lights or corner offices. He wanted land, real land. A ranch where he could raise cattle, mend fences with his own hands, and watch the sun rise without the noise of traffic drowning it out. When he finally signed the deed 6 weeks earlier, it had felt like victory. 40 acres outside Abilene. Rolling pasture, a creek cutting through the backside, enough room for his herd and for his own peace of mind. For Marcus, it was more than property. It was freedom. But freedom, he quickly learned, came with fine print. At closing, he had skimmed past the stack of papers, dense legal paragraphs buried in a binder as thick as his fist. Covenants, restrictions, association bylaws. He remembered the realtor saying, "It's just standard HOA stuff. Everyone signs it." Exhausted from the process and eager to hold the keys, Marcus signed where they told him. He didn't realize that in those signatures, the HOA had written itself into the heart of his dream. At first, it was small things, a letter about the color of his shed, a notice about the gravel drive needing community-approved surfacing. Annoying, yes, but tolerable. He had lived through worse. But Marjorie Kane, the HOA president, had other ideas. A woman known for her sharp suits and sharper tongue, she treated the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. Residents whispered that if she didn't like you, she'd find a way to bury you in notices and fines until you either bent or broke. Marcus, new to the community, and the only black rancher in the subdivision, seemed to catch her attention right away. Now, with a fence she didn't own cutting. Across his access road and padlocking his only gate, Marcus understood this wasn't about community standards. It was about something else. Power, control, maybe even prejudice. He had worked too hard to be fenced in by anyone. The land was his cattle were his, and his dignity was his. And if Marjorie thought she could strip that away with a padlock, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The first week after the gate went up, Marcus tried to keep calm. He hauled extra water tanks into the pasture, working late into the night to make sure his herd had enough. But each day his frustration grew. Not just because of the work, but because of the letters. They came one after another, white envelopes stamped with bold black ink, HOA Compliance Office. Inside, the language was cold and clinical. You are in violation of perimeter fencing guidelines. Fines will be assessed at $50 per day until corrected. A few days later, another letter came. The fine had doubled. Now it was $100 a day. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. Visual inconsistency detrimental to community appeal. 1. Notice read. He muttered the words out loud in his kitchen, the paper crumpling in his fist. I'm raising cattle, not decorating a golf course. When he confronted Marjorie at the next HOA meeting, she didn't blink. Sitting at the center of a long folding table, flanked by board members in collared shirts, she spoke into the microphone as though he were just another agenda item. Mr. Taylor, she said crisply, your fence does not meet community standards. Until it is corrected, the fines will continue. Marcus leaned forward, voice steady but edged with steel. That fence keeps my cattle in. It's functional, it's safe, and it's on my property. A man at the far end of the board table adjusted his glasses. Rules are rules, sir. If we made exceptions for you, we'd have to make them for everyone. Marcus glanced around the room, scanning the faces of his neighbors. Some avoided eye contact. Others offered quick, nervous nods of support. But no one spoke up. Except one, Glenn Porter, a retired trucker who'd lived in the community for 2 decades, raised his hand. Marjorie, maybe give the man time to adjust. He's new. No need to slap a padlock on his gate. Marjorie didn't even look at him. The HOA must maintain standards, Mr. Porter. If Mr. Taylor wishes to be part of this community, he must follow the rules. Marcus felt the weight of her words. They weren't just rules. They were ultimatums. Bend or break. That night, back at his ranch, he sat on the porch long after sunset. His cattle lowed in the distance, restless and thirsty for creek water they could no longer reach. The air was heavy with more than heat. It carried the message Marjorie had made clear. This wasn't about fences. It was about pushing him out, and Marcus knew if he didn't fight back, she'd succeed. By the second week, the fight had shifted from irritation to exhaustion. Marcus was spending more time hauling water than tending the rest of the ranch. The cattle were uneasy, pacing near the new fence, their instincts pulling them toward the creek that now lay just out of reach. Each trip with the tanks reminded Marcus of the padlock glinting in the sun, a symbol of how far Marjorie was willing to go. Neighbors began to whisper. Some avoided him altogether, pretending not to notice when he walked into the feed store or passed them on the road. Others offered quiet words of encouragement when no one else was around. It was clear the HOA president's shadow stretched farther than the clubhouse. One evening, Glenn Porter pulled up in his old pickup, a cooler of beer rattling in the back. He leaned against Marcus's porch railing, arms crossed. You need to understand something, Marcus. Marjorie's been running this place like her own little fiefdom for years. Folks don't cross her because she makes it expensive. Marcus frowned. Expensive how? Glenn shrugged. Stack of fines. Legal threats. Calls to zoning boards. If she wants to bury you, she'll do it with paperwork. The next day, that warning proved true. Another letter arrived, this one with a photograph. It showed one of Marcus's water tanks slightly tilted, on uneven ground. The notice claimed it was a safety hazard and demanded immediate removal. Marcus slammed the letter onto the kitchen table. That's not oversight. That's harassment. Glenn just shook his head. That's Marjorie. At the next HOA meeting, the room felt different. More crowded. More tense. A woman named Paula Green stood at the front, voice sharp as she argued about a tree the HOA had forced her to cut down. She glanced at Marcus mid-sentence, then quickly looked away. After the meeting, she found him outside in the parking lot. You're Taylor, right? The rancher with the fence issue? That's me, Marcus said. Paula lowered her voice. They're going to run you down until you either fold or move out. Marjorie doesn't care who you are. She cares about winning. Marcus studied her face. Then why do people let her keep winning? Her answer was almost a whisper. Because most folks don't want trouble, and she knows how to make trouble feel expensive. Driving home that night, Marcus gripped the wheel tighter than usual. The HOA wasn't just enforcing rules, they were building a culture of fear, and by refusing to bend, he had just drawn his own line in the sand. It was a windy Thursday morning when Marcus stumbled upon the first real crack in Marjorie's wall of control. He had been fixing a trough pump near the north pasture when he noticed the herd clustered along the fence line, restless and bellowing toward the creek. Following their gaze, Marcus's heart sank. The new perimeter fence didn't just block his road anymore, it completely sealed off the only reliable water source on that side of the property. He dropped his gloves, climbed over the fence, and rattled the gate until the padlock clanged against steel. No answer, no access, just silence. His frustration boiled into anger. He called the HOA office again, his voice hard. My cattle can't survive cut off from water. I need access to that creek immediately. The receptionist's tone was clipped, almost rehearsed. Mr. Taylor, the HOA has confirmed other water points exist on your property. They're backup tanks, Marcus snapped. In a heat wave, they won't last a week. Do you want to be responsible for dead cattle? I'll forward your concern to the board, she said flatly before hanging up. By that afternoon, Marcus had driven straight to Marjorie's pristine house. Perfect hedges, spotless siding, the picture of control. She answered the door in a pale blue blouse. Her expression polite, but ice-cold. This isn't about fines anymore, Marcus said, struggling to keep his voice even. You're cutting my animals off from water. That's not just wrong. It's dangerous. Marjorie's reply was smooth, almost smug. The HOA operates under uniform standards, Mr. Taylor. If we make exceptions, it undermines the community's integrity. The integrity of the community? Marcus shot back. We're talking about living creatures depending on me to keep them alive. Her smile didn't falter. Rules are rules. As Marcus walked away, he caught curtains shifting across the street. Neighbors were watching. This fight was no longer private. It was spectacle. 2 days later, the unexpected twist appeared. A bright red for sale sign planted squarely on the narrow half-acre lot that contained the very gate Marjorie had locked. Marcus stood there staring, the gears in his mind turning fast. If he owned that strip of land, he'd own the gate. And if he owned the gate, he'd hold the key, literally and legally. But he also knew one thing for certain. If Marjorie caught wind of his plan, she would kill the deal before the ink ever dried. So whatever he did next had to be fast, quiet, and invisible. Marcus didn't rush straight to the real estate office. He knew better than to tip his hand. In small communities, word traveled faster than wildfire, and if Marjorie heard even a whisper, she'd find a way to shut the door before it opened. That afternoon, he drove into Abilene and stepped into the office of Tom Beard, a local attorney known for his sharp eye and steady judgment. Marcus spread the letters, the photos, and the latest notices across the desk. "Tom," he said, voice low, "I want to know if what they're doing is even legal, and if I buy the land with that gate on it, do I control it?" Tom leaned back. In his chair, glasses perched low on his nose as he studied the documents. "The bad news? The HOA is operating within the covenants you signed. Those papers give them broad authority. The good news? If that parcel really is separate from their holdings and you buy it clean, then yes, you'd own the gate. Full stop." Marcus felt a flicker of hope. "So what's the catch?" "The catch," Tom replied, "is keeping your name off the deal. If Marjorie finds out you're the buyer, she'll pressure the seller, push the county, or drag this into court before the ink's dry. You need cover." That night, Marcus called an old friend from college, Brett Lawson, who ran a property management company 2 counties over. Brett listened quietly, then said, "I'll set up an LLC under my company's umbrella. We'll make the purchase through that. Your name never shows." It was bold, risky, but Marcus knew it was the only way. For days, he kept up his routine, feeding cattle, hauling water, nodding at neighbors as though nothing had changed. Inside, though, he was living a double life. At night, he studied plat maps under a dim kitchen light, memorizing every line of property boundaries. Glenn stopped by one evening and caught him hunched over the maps. "You're cooking something up," Glenn said with a grin. Marcus smirked. "If I told you, you'd have to swear it stays between us." Glenn raised a hand. "My lips are sealed." When Marcus laid out the plan, Glenn's grin widened. "That's bold, and I like it." Meanwhile, Marjorie seemed to sense something was shifting. She began showing up near the fence more often, sometimes with board members at her side, whispering as they glanced in Marcus's direction. But he kept his face unreadable, never revealing the quiet storm he was preparing. 2 weeks later, Brett called. The seller accepted the LLC's offer. No counter, no questions. Escrow's opening. For the first time in months, Marcus allowed himself to exhale. The gate wasn't his yet, but soon it would be. The morning of the closing felt heavy, as though the sky itself was holding its breath. Marcus dressed like it was any other day. Faded jeans, boots dusted from the pasture, a plain button-up shirt. He drove into Abilene without telling a soul, parking behind the small brick office where the title company operated. Inside, Brett was waiting, a grin on his face and a thick folder of paperwork in his hands. "You ready to make her life complicated?" Brett asked. Marcus smirked, though his stomach churned with nerves. "Let's get it done." The process itself was simple. Because the LLC was listed as the buyer, Marcus's name never touched the official records. Within an hour, the ink was dry, the paperwork stamped, and a heavy silver key set on a worn leather fob was pushed across the table toward him. "They're yours," Brett said. Marcus picked up the keys, running his thumb across the largest one. It was more than a piece of metal. It was leverage. It was freedom. Back at the ranch, he parked near the gravel strip and walked the last stretch to the gate. It stood there just as it always had, locked tight. But this time, everything was different. He slid the key into the padlock, felt the smooth turn, and heard the sharp click as the shackle popped free. The sound echoed across the pasture like a gunshot, final, unmistakable. He swung the gate wide, the hinges groaning as though protesting their own surrender. His cattle, restless from weeks of waiting, wandered toward the creek. For the first time in months, Marcus felt control returning. That sense of victory lasted only 2 days. On the third morning, a white SUV pulled up in front of the gate. Marjorie stepped out, heels clicking against the gravel, clipboard in hand. 2 board members followed close behind. "Mr. Taylor," she said coldly, "you appear to have accessed HOA property without authorization." Marcus leaned against the gate, calm but unyielding. "This isn't HOA property anymore. I own this lot. County records will back me up." Her eyes narrowed. That's impossible. The association had first right of refusal. Maybe they did, Marcus replied evenly. But they didn't use it. The seller took my offer. The gate is mine, and I've got the deed to prove it. One of the board members shifted uneasily. Marjorie, if that's true, she cut him off with a sharp glance. We'll see about that. Turning back to Marcus, her voice hardened. Don't think this is over. We'll challenge it. She spun on her heel, her SUV spitting gravel as she sped away. By that afternoon, Marcus's inbox was flooded with HOA emails demanding clarification. He forwarded them all to Tom Beard, who replied with just 4 words. Let them make the next move. The next move came fast. 2 days later, Marcus returned from hauling feed to find Marjorie at the gate with 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies. Neighbors lingered nearby, watching like it was a small-town showdown. Deputies, Marcus greeted calmly, paperwork in hand. One stepped forward. We got a call about a property dispute. We're here to keep the peace. Marjorie crossed her arms. That lot has always been under HOA management. He's interfering with community access. Marcus handed over the deed. The deputy studied it, then nodded. It checks out. He owns it. Marjorie's jaw tightened. We'll take this to court. That's your right, ma'am, the deputy said. But for now, no laws being broken here. The SUVs rolled away, but the tension didn't. Word spread faster than wildfire. At the feed store, strangers shook Marcus's hand. About time someone stood up to her, one man said. At the grocery store, an HOA volunteer hissed, You're making this harder for all of us. By week's end, the local paper ran a headline. Rancher battles HOA over locked gate. A photo showed Marcus leaning against the gate, arms crossed, defiant. Soon, talk radio shows were buzzing, callers arguing about property rights versus community order. The HOA escalated. An emergency board meeting was called. Marjorie, dressed in navy with her necklace gleaming under the fluorescent lights, announced a proposed amendment, granting the HOA authority over any access points serving more than one property. Marcus raised his hand. Convenient timing, you're not making rules, you're rewriting them just to target me. This isn't about you, she snapped, though her eyes never left his. It's about the community. The board voted 3-2 in favor, but the amendment still needed majority homeowner approval. Afterward, neighbors approached Marcus quietly. Keep fighting, one whispered. You're the first who hasn't folded. By then, the fight was no longer about just Marcus. It had cracked something open in the community. Fear was giving way to frustration. People who'd been silent for years were finding their voices. But Marjorie wasn't done. Within a week, Marcus was served with a lawsuit. The HOA claimed the purchase was invalid, citing procedural irregularities. It was their last-ditch effort to claw back control. In court, the hearings were tense. Marjorie arrived early, immaculate as always, flanked by allies. Marcus sat quietly with Tom, folder of evidence in hand. Neighbors filled the benches, some cheering silently for Marcus, others glaring in loyalty to the board. Paula Green, the woman with the cut-down tree, approached Marcus during a break. Win or lose, she said softly. You've already changed things. People aren't afraid anymore. But Marcus wasn't aiming for a moral victory. He wanted the real thing. That victory came on a bright Tuesday morning in early summer. The judge read the ruling clearly. The sale was valid, the title stood, and the HOA had no authority over the gate. What's more, they were ordered to cover Marcus's legal fees. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Glenn flashed Marcus a thumbs up. Paula beamed. Even a few who'd once stayed silent came forward to shake his hand. On the courthouse steps, reporters swarmed. Marcus kept it simple. This was never about offense. It was about principle. You don't let someone take what's yours just because they think they can. I hope this gives others the courage to stand their ground. Back at the ranch, He unlocked the gate again, letting the cattle graze freely by the creek. The breeze carried across the pasture, lighter now, as though the land itself had exhaled. Glenn joined him with 2 cold beers, clinking bottles against. "The railing. Feels good, doesn't it?" Glenn said. Marcus smiled. "It's more than that. It's knowing that standing up once might give others the courage to do the same. The battle had been won, but the real change was only beginning." When the dust finally settled, Marcus stood on his porch one quiet evening, the sky painted in streaks of orange and violet. The cattle grazed peacefully near the creek, their low calls rolling across the pasture like a hymn. For the first time since the fence had gone up, Marcus felt truly at ease. Not because the HOA had stopped fighting, they hadn't. Not because Marjorie had vanished, she was still very much around. But because the balance of power had shifted. The padlock that once symbolized control was now in his hands, and that made all the difference. In the weeks that followed, Marcus noticed subtle changes in the community. HOA meetings no longer carried the same fear-laced silence. Board members spoke more cautiously, knowing eyes were on them. Neighbors who had once avoided him now stopped to chat at the feed store or wave as he drove by. Some even whispered their own stories. Small injustices they'd endured, but never dared challenge. It dawned on Marcus that what he had done was bigger than winning a case. He had broken the culture of fear. By refusing to bow, by standing his ground, he had given others permission to do the same. One afternoon, Paula Green stopped by with a plate of cornbread. She sat on his porch steps, looking out across the pasture. "You know," she said, "people keep talking about you. They're calling you the man who turned the lock." Marcus chuckled softly. "I didn't set out to be anybody's symbol. I just wanted my cattle to drink from the creek." "Maybe," Paula said, "but symbols don't ask for the role, they earn it." Her words stayed with him, because the truth was Marcus's story wasn't just about one ranch or one gate. It was about something far more universal. The moment you stop letting someone else write the rules for your life is the moment you start living on your own terms. Every community has its gatekeepers. Some wear titles, some hide behind rules, and some wield power through fear. But fear only works if people let it. The day Marcus slid that key into the lock, he wasn't just opening a gate. He was breaking a pattern that said stay. Quiet, go along, don't make waves. And that's why his story matters, not just for ranchers, not just for homeowners battling over fences and bylaws, but for anyone who's ever felt trapped by a boss, by a system, by someone who thought they could dictate your freedom. Marcus proved something simple yet powerful. Persistence beats intimidation. Truth beats fear. And sometimes the only way to change the rules is to refuse to play by them. So if you're listening to this right now, maybe you've got your own locked gate. Maybe it's not steel or padlocks. Maybe it's a job that drains you, a system that silences you, or a person who keeps telling you what you can and can't do. The gate looks different for everyone, but the principle stays the same. Don't assume you have to accept it. Don't assume they hold the only key. Ask questions, push back, look for the cracks in the wall they've built. And when the moment comes, be ready to take back what's yours. Because freedom isn't handed out, it's claimed. Marcus Taylor claimed his with a deed, a key, and the courage to say no. You might claim yours in a different way, but the lesson remains. No one can fence in your life unless you let them. So the next time you feel boxed in, remember this story. Remember the rancher who refused to bow, who bought the very gate meant to trap him, and who proved that even the strongest lock can be turned when you hold the courage to twist the key. And if you believe stories like this matter, if you believe in standing up, in fighting back, in living on your own terms, make sure you subscribe, because there are more stories to tell. Real ones, hard ones. Stories that remind you your voice matters, your rights matter, and your freedom is worth defending. Because The truth is simple. Fences can be built, padlocks can be set, but as long as you don't give up, there's always a way through.